The great hall stretched before Ambassador Kelvin Stone like a cathedral made of light and metal. He stood alone at the center of the Galactic Council chambers while 300 alien species watched from their elevated seats. His hands gripped the cold metal podium and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. Behind him, floating displays showed Earth in all her wounded glory, with scars from centuries of war and pollution marking her surface like old wounds that refused to heal. High Arbiter Zephalon rose from his seat, and his crystalline body caught the amber light and scattered it across the room like a prism. The chamber fell silent, and Kelvin felt his heart hammering against his ribs because he knew what was coming. 5 years he had spent here pleading and explaining and showing evidence of humanity's progress. 5 years of diplomatic dinners and quiet conversations and desperate negotiations. None of it had mattered. The Arbiter's voice resonated through the chamber without warmth or mercy. Humanity had been evaluated and judged and found wanting. The verdict was unanimous and final. Earth would be quarantined and isolated from the galactic community. No trade would flow to human worlds. No ships would carry human travelers. No communication would bridge the gap between humanity and the stars. Any attempt to leave the solar system would be met with immediate military force. Kelvin felt the words like physical blows, and beside him, his aide, Claire Murphy, gasped softly. She had been born on Mars colony and had never seen Earth until she joined the diplomatic service. Now those colonies would be evacuated and abandoned, and her birthplace would become a ghost town floating in the red dust. The ambassador found his voice, though it felt like speaking through broken glass. He asked how long this sentence would last, and the answer came back cold and certain. 10,000 years minimum, they said. Perhaps by then humanity would have evolved beyond their violent nature. Perhaps by then they would be ready to join civilized society. Perhaps. The council representatives began filing out, and their conversations filled the chamber with a sound like wind through dead leaves. Most avoided looking at Kelvin, but one figure approached from the shadows. Scales was a Saurian diplomat whose real name human tongues could not pronounce. His reptilian face showed something that might have been sympathy or pity. He spoke quietly so others would not hear. He had voted against the quarantine, he said. Many had voted against it, but fear had won over reason. The council remembered the border wars when young humanity had fought 4 alien species at once and somehow managed to survive. They remembered the merchant fleet incident and the tragedy with the Delphian refugees. Old wounds ran deep, and trust once broken was hard to repair. Then Scales said something that made Kelvin's blood run cold. There were rumors, he whispered. Old stories passed among senior council members about humanity's early days in space. Stories about military projects that were started, but never finished. Colony ships that left Earth but never arrived at their destinations. Weapons platforms that disappeared from all official records. If such things existed, Scales warned, then humanity should keep them hidden, because the council was already afraid. Proof of secret military assets would turn quarantine into something far worse. Before Kelvin could ask more questions, Scales slipped away into the crowd of departing diplomats. The ambassador stood alone in the emptying chamber and wondered if humanity's past sins would destroy their future completely. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire across every continent and every city. Riots erupted in New York, where crowds smashed windows and burned cars in frustrated rage. Shanghai went dark as protesters shut down power grids. São Paulo's streets filled with weeping families who had relatives in the off-world colonies. The Mars and Europa colonies sent desperate final messages home before council ships arrived to enforce the evacuation. Kelvin watched the feeds from his transport ship and felt the crushing weight of failure settle on his shoulders. But deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, something else was happening. General Peter Hayes sat in a bunker that had been sealed for 400 years. The room smelled of recycled air and old machinery. Before him, an ancient computer terminal hummed to life as he entered a password that had not been used since humanity's most desperate days. The screen flickered and displayed a simple message in stark white letters. Contingency Protocol Omega, it read. Do you wish to proceed? Colonel Lisa Morgan stood beside Hayes, and her face was pale in the dim light. She asked if they were really going to do this. Opening Pandora's box, she called it. Releasing something that their ancestors had locked away, hoping it would never be needed. Hayes looked at the screen for a long moment. The council had left them no choice, he said. They thought humanity was helpless and weak and conquered. They were wrong. Humanity's ancestors had prepared for exactly this scenario. They had built insurance against the day when the galaxy turned against them. Now that day had come. He pressed the confirmation key. Far beyond the edge of the solar system in the frozen darkness between stars, ancient systems began to wake. Massive ships larger than anything humanity had built in 3 centuries started their power-up sequences. Inside those ships in chambers that looked like metal coffins, thousands of men and women began to dream. Their neural patterns rose slowly from the depths of suspended animation like swimmers rising toward distant sunlight. They had gone to sleep 400 years ago when Earth still remembered how to fight wars without mercy or restraint. The sleeper fleet was awakening, and the galaxy would soon remember why they had feared humanity in the first place. The Council had passed their judgment thinking Earth was alone and vulnerable and unable to resist. They were about to learn that humanity never forgot and never forgave and never faced extinction without baring their teeth one final time. The sentence had been pronounced, but humanity would write their own ending to this story. In the cold dark between stars, 600 warships stirred from their long sleep and prepared to remind the galaxy of a simple truth. You could condemn humanity, but you could never make them helpless. Captain Jake Morris had been asleep for 417 years. His last memory was climbing into the cryogenic pod aboard the ESS Valiant and saluting his crew one final time. He remembered closing his eyes with the absolute certainty that he was helping secure humanity's future among the stars. The wake-up sequence was only supposed to activate if Earth faced an existential threat. Now consciousness returned slowly, like surfacing from deep water, and his first thought was confusion mixed with dread. A voice crackled through his neural implant, distorted by centuries of technological drift. "Captain Morris," the voice said. "Can you hear me?" His eyes snapped open and the pod door hissed as it lifted away. Cold air rushed over his skin and his muscles screamed in protest after centuries of frozen stillness. The medical bay looked exactly as he remembered, with pristine white walls and softly glowing readouts that monitored his vital signs. Jake's voice came out rough and unused. "This is Morris," he said. "Who am I speaking to?" The answer came back from a man who identified himself as General Peter Hayes from Earth Defense Command. "Welcome back to consciousness," the general said. "I apologize for the abrupt awakening, but we have a situation." Jake swung his legs over the side of the pod and accepted a gray jumpsuit from a medical drone. How long, he asked, though part of him already knew the answer would be measured in centuries, not years. "Over 400 years, Hayes told him. "The world has changed significantly, Captain. We're currently under galactic quarantine. The Council has condemned humanity and forbidden us from leaving our solar system." The words took time to sink in because Jake had grown up during the border wars when humanity was still adjusting to alien contact. The Sleeper Fleet program had been created specifically as insurance against this exact scenario. "So the protocol worked," Jake said as he pulled on his boots. "Where's the rest of my crew?" Hayes explained that all 600 ships in the Sleeper Fleet were being awakened. Approximately 3 million personnel total. Jake was among the first 50 captains to be revived. Then Hayes said something that made Jake pause. "You need to understand something, Captain. The humanity you remember doesn't exist anymore. We've spent 400 years trying to integrate with galactic society, trying to prove we're not the warlike savages they believe us to be. And it didn't work," Jake said. "No," Hayes replied. "So now we're faced with a choice. Accept this quarantine and watch our species stagnate, or remind the galaxy why they feared us in the first place." Jake made his way to the observation deck and his body slowly remembered how to move. Through the viewports he could see other ships in the fleet. Massive dreadnoughts and carrier groups that represented humanity's last desperate bid for survival centuries. Ego the Valiant itself was a Hammer-class battlecruiser bristling with weapons, systems that predated most of the Council's current technology. Primitive by modern standards perhaps, but built with a brutality and efficiency that more civilized societies had long abandoned. On the bridge, Jake found his command crew already assembling. His first officer, Commander Nathan Price, looked as disoriented as Jake felt. The weapons officer, Patricia Cole, was running diagnostics on systems that hadn't been active in centuries. Jake ordered a report as he slid into his command chair. Patricia confirmed that all primary systems were online. Weapons were charging and would reach full capacity in 6 hours. Navigation showed they were approximately 3 light-years from the Kuiper Belt's edge. The comm officer, Greg Foster, reported an encrypted quantum link to Earth Defense Command was stable. They were also picking up standard galactic traffic. The Council had patrol ships monitoring all approaches to Earth's system, but those patrols didn't know the sleeper fleet was here. Yet Nathan added, 3 million people waking up and 600 ships powering up would generate a signature someone would notice eventually. Jake nodded as he studied the tactical display. The sleeper fleet had been positioned in a carefully chosen dead zone, hidden among the gravitational chaos of 3 nearby brown dwarfs. It was the perfect place to hide a fleet, which is exactly why their ancestors had chosen it. Greg announced they were receiving a fleet-wide transmission from Admiral Chen. The main screen showed a man in his 60s wearing the uniform of the old Earth Defense Force. Jake recognized the rank insignia but not the face. Admiral Raymond Chen began speaking, and his voice carried the authority of someone born to command. To all fleet commanders, he said, you've been briefed on our current situation. Earth is under quarantine. Our colonies have been evacuated. The Galactic Council has declared humanity too dangerous to interact with the wider galaxy. Then Chen said something that made Jake sit up straighter. They are not entirely wrong, he said. Jake saw Nathan shift uncomfortably beside him. We were created as a last resort, Chen continued. A hidden blade that humanity hoped it would never need to draw. But now that blade is drawn and we must decide how to use it. Over the coming days, you'll receive mission briefings and strategic assessments. But understand this. We are not here to start a war. We are here to remind the galaxy that condemning humanity comes with consequences. The transmission ended, and silence filled the bridge. Nathan asked quietly what their orders were. Jake stood and headed for his ready room. Get the crew fully operational, he said. I want combat drills running within 24 hours. And someone find out exactly what the tactical situation looks like in Earth's system. He paused at the door. We may be ghosts from humanity's past, but we're about to become very real to the Galactic Council. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Captains and crews struggled to understand their new reality, while preparing for a conflict 4 centuries in the making. The sleeper fleet was awake and operational and ready. The galaxy was about to remember why they had feared humanity, why they had written those old war stories, why even in defeat humanity had never truly surrendered. The ghost ships were rising from the dark, and they carried with them all the fury and determination of a species that refused to die quietly. Council Security Commander Vexlar was reviewing routine patrol reports when the anomaly first appeared on his screens. His species, the Zenthari, had compound eyes that could process multiple data streams simultaneously, which made them perfect for surveillance work. But even with his enhanced perception, he almost missed it. The readings looked like background radiation at first glance, just another patch of empty space between stars. But something about the pattern bothered him. Computer, he clicked through his mandibles. Enhance Sector 773. The holographic display zoomed in on a region of space 3 light-years from Earth's quarantine boundary. What had seemed like normal radiation suddenly resolved into something far more troubling. Thermal signatures consistent with massive power generation, hundreds of them clustered together in the dark. How many sources, Vexlar demanded. The computer's voice was calm as it recalculated. Initial count shows 412 distinct signatures. Revising. 520. Correction. 603. Vexlar's blood went cold in his veins. 600 ships generating that much power would represent a fleet larger than most council member worlds possessed. And they were positioned just outside humanity's quarantine zone. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. Alert High Arbiter Zephalon immediately, he ordered. And get me a tactical analysis team now. Within the hour, the Council's emergency session was underway. Representatives who had been preparing to return to their home worlds were hastily recalled. The chamber hummed with anxious conversation as Vexlar presented his findings on the main display. These signatures appeared within the last 18 hours, he explained. They match no known commercial or civilian designs. Based on energy output and spatial distribution, we're looking at a military fleet. Ambassador Threx of the Orion Collective stood up in disbelief. Impossible, he declared. Earth has no fleet. We've monitored their shipyards for centuries. Their largest warship is barely the size of a council frigate. The Andromedan representative named Whisper floated forward. Perhaps someone else is gathering forces near their system, he suggested. The Saurian Empire, maybe. Or the Void Clan's High Arbiter. Zephalon studied the data with his crystalline sensory organs. Commander Vexlar, he asked, do we have any visual confirmation? Not yet, High Arbiter. The fleet is positioned in a brown dwarf cluster, which makes direct observation difficult. However, I've dispatched 3 stealth reconnaissance drones. We should have imaging within 12 hours. What Vexlar didn't mention was his growing suspicion. The positioning was too careful, too perfectly chosen to hide a large force, and the timing just days after Earth's condemnation seemed more than coincidental. Back on Earth, Ambassador Kelvin Stone received an encrypted message from his friend, Scales. The Saurian diplomat's warning was brief but urgent. The Council knows something is out there. They're investigating. Whatever humanity is hiding, they will find it. Kelvin forwarded the message to General Hayes, who sat in the bunker command center surrounded by tactical displays showing the sleeper fleet's status. They're going to discover us sooner than we hoped, Hayes said to his staff. We need to accelerate the timeline. Colonel Lisa Morgan frowned. The fleet crews are still recovering from cryosleep. Most ships aren't at full combat readiness. If the Council responds aggressively, we're vulnerable. Which is why we need to make the first move, Hayes replied. Not an attack, but a demonstration. Something that makes the Council reconsider their position. Meanwhile, aboard the ESS Valiant, Captain Jake Morris was dealing with his own challenges. Half his crew was still experiencing cryosickness. His weapon systems were only at 60% capacity. His ship's AI was having difficulty integrating with modern communication protocols. Then Greg Foster announced a priority transmission from Fleet Command. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen, and this time he looked grim. All ships be advised. Council reconnaissance assets are moving toward our position. We've been discovered. Operation Daybreak is now active. Repeat. Operation Daybreak is active. Jake felt his pulse quicken. Operation Daybreak was the plan to reveal the sleeper fleet to the galaxy, but on humanity's terms rather than the Council's. All hands battle stations, Jake ordered. Bring all weapon systems online. Navigation plot a course to Rally Point Alpha. Nathan warned that would bring them within range of the quarantine boundary. That's the idea, Commander, Jake said. The Council condemned us thinking we were helpless. Time to correct that assumption. Across the sleeper fleet, 600 ships began moving as one. Ancient engines built with technologies the modern galaxy had forgotten roared to life. Point defense grids activated. Missile tubes flooded. Energy weapons charged with a hungry hum. The ghost ships of humanity's past were no longer hiding. When Vexlar's reconnaissance drones finally transmitted their visual data, the Council chamber erupted in chaos. The images showed ships unlike anything in the current galactic database. Massive and angular vessels covered in armor plating and weapon emplacements that spoke of a more brutal era of warfare. Those designs are over 400 years old, a Zenthari analyst reported in disbelief from humanity's pre-Council period, but they shouldn't exist. Earth's records showed these ship classes were all decommissioned or scrapped. They lied, Threx hissed. The humans maintained a secret fleet all this time, hidden away like a coiled serpent waiting to strike. High Arbiter Zephalon remained calm, but his crystalline form pulsed with agitated colors. How many ships, he asked. 600, confirmed High Arbiter, each one approximately 2 to 3 times the mass of our standard cruisers. And they're moving toward Earth's system. Then they're not hiding anymore, Zephalon observed. They want us to see them. Commander Vexlar, what is the current disposition of our quarantine fleet? 37 ships, High Arbiter, mostly patrol craft and monitors. Nothing designed for fleet combat. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Council had condemned humanity while holding overwhelming military superiority, but now the calculus had changed dramatically. The balance of power had shifted in the span of a single day. We must respond with force, Threx declared. Summon the battle groups from nearby sectors. Show the humans that their ancient weapons cannot threaten the Council. But Scales rose to his feet, and his scales flushed with agitation. With respect, High Arbiter, perhaps we should attempt diplomacy before escalation. We condemned them. They are simply revealing that condemnation has consequences. They maintained a secret military fleet for 4 centuries, Threx shot back. This proves they cannot be trusted. Zephalon raised a crystalline appendage for silence. Both positions have merit. Commander Vexlar, send a message to the human fleet. Inform them that any approach to Earth's system will be considered an act of war. Then prepare our response forces. He turned to address the full chamber. The Council will not be intimidated, but neither will we rush blindly into conflict. We will see what the humans do next. The message was transmitted on all frequencies. Aboard the Valiant, Jake read it with a grim smile. They're scared, Patricia observed. Good. Fear leads to negotiation, or to desperate violence, Nathan countered. We're playing a dangerous game, sir. Jake nodded as he watched his fleet position themselves just outside the quarantine boundary. Behind them, Earth hung in space like a blue marble, beautiful and vulnerable. All games are dangerous when the stakes are this high, Commander. But we're not the ones who started this game. We're just reminding the Council that humanity knows how to finish them. The sleeper fleet held position at the edge of Earth's quarantine zone, with 600 ships arranged in a defensive formation that would have made any military strategist proud. On the other side of the invisible Boundary Council, ships were arriving by the hour and assembling their own fleet in response. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and every sensor on both sides tracked the other with deadly precision. Admiral Raymond Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the ESS Defiance, and watched the tactical situation develop. The ship was a Titan-class command carrier, and the largest vessel in the sleeper fleet, a relic of humanity's most militaristic era when bigger always meant better and overwhelming force was the only doctrine that mattered. His tactical officer, Commander Helen Brooks, highlighted the display with practiced efficiency. Status report, Chen ordered. Council has assembled 83 ships so far, with more en route. Mix of cruisers and destroyers and support vessels. They're maintaining a defensive posture, but have active targeting locks on our forward elements. Any communication attempts, Chen asked. Several demands for us to power down and submit to Council authority. No actual dialogue. Chen nodded because he had expected as much. The Council had spent centuries believing humanity was defanged and domesticated. This revelation shook the foundation of everything they thought they knew. Get me a channel to High Arbiter Zephalon, Chen said. Let's see if we can talk like civilized beings. On Earth, General Hayes watched news feeds from around the planet. Crowds were gathering in city squares with their faces turned toward the sky. Some celebrated, viewing the fleet as salvation. Others protested, fearing the return of humanity's violent past. Public opinion is split, Colonel Morgan observed. 43% support using the fleet to challenge the quarantine. 38% want us to stand down. The rest are undecided. Democracy in action, Hayes muttered. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a referendum. The Council is assembling serious firepower up there. On board, the valiant Captain Jake Morris was conducting combat drills with his crew when the call came through from Admiral Chen. All fleet commanders stand by for a council-wide transmission. They've agreed to talk. Jake settled into his command chair, watching as High Arbiter Zephalon's crystalline form appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the council chamber was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. I am High Arbiter Zephalon of the Galactic Council. We address the commanders of the unidentified human fleet. Your existence violates multiple council treaties regarding military assets and truthful disclosure. Your presence at the quarantine boundary is an act of aggression. Admiral Chen's response was measured but firm. High Arbiter, this is Admiral Raymond Chen of the Earth Defense Force. These ships were placed in deep space 400 years ago as a contingency measure. We violated no treaties because we predated those treaties. As for aggression, we have not fired a single shot or crossed into Council territory. Your very existence is a threat, Ambassador Threx interjected with his reptilian features twisted in anger. You maintained a secret fleet, weapons of war hidden away while claiming to pursue peace. We pursued peace for 4 centuries, Chen replied. We integrated with galactic society, followed council laws, contributed to the collective prosperity. And how were we repaid? With condemnation and isolation. You declared us unfit for civilization while holding overwhelming military superiority over us. Forgive us for preparing for such an eventuality. The chamber erupted in argument. Some representatives supported Threx's position and demanded the fleet's immediate surrender. Others, including Scales and several dozen neutral parties, argued for negotiation. Ambassador Kelvin Stone, watching from Earth, felt a surge of hope. The divided council response suggested room for diplomacy. But that hope dimmed when Zephalon spoke again. Admiral Chen, the council cannot allow this challenge to our authority. We demand the sleeper fleet power down its weapons and accept council inspection teams. In return, we will review Earth's quarantine status at our next session. Review it, Chen's voice hardened. High Arbiter, with respect, we're done asking permission to exist. Here are our terms. Lift the quarantine. Restore Earth's full membership in galactic society. Recognize our right to maintain defensive forces. In return, we will submit to reasonable arms limitations and inspections. Impossible, Threx snapped. You are in no position to dictate terms. Aren't we? Chen said and gestured. The tactical display shifted to show the fleet's formation. We have 600 warships crewed by people who remember when humanity was at war with half the galaxy. They are armed with weapons your civilized sensibilities have long abandoned as too brutal and too effective. Many of you remember the border wars when young and reckless humanity fought 4 council species simultaneously and managed to draw. These ships and these crews are from that era. Jake watched the faces of council representatives as Chen's words sank in. Fear and anger and calculation all mixed together. The border wars had been a dark chapter in human-alien relations marked by shocking brutality on both sides. Humanity had earned its reputation for ferocity in those conflicts, and the scars still remained in galactic memory. Is that a threat? Admiral Zephalon asked quietly. It's a statement of capability, High Arbiter. But I'll be clear. If your fleet fires on us, we will defend ourselves with extreme prejudice. And if Earth itself is threatened, every ship in this fleet will burn a path to your homeworlds. Not because we want war, but because we refuse to be exterminated for the crime of being different. The transmission ended, leaving both sides to contemplate their next moves. On the Valiant's bridge, Nathan turned to Jake with worry written across his face. Sir, are we really prepared to fight the entire Galactic Council? Jake looked at the display showing the Council fleet still growing as reinforcements arrived. They were outnumbered and outgunned by any reasonable metric, but their ships were built for one purpose, which was overwhelming violence delivered with ruthless efficiency. Prepared, Jake admitted. No. Willing. That's a different question. These council species got comfortable, Nathan. They've spent centuries playing at war with rules and conventions. We come from an era when war meant total commitment. When losing meant extinction. He stood and walked to the viewport. Let's hope they remember that before someone does something stupid. But on a council destroyer designated Righteous Fury Commander Kelthar of the Orion Collective was preparing to do exactly that. A hardliner who believed humanity should have been exterminated rather than quarantined. He had quietly assembled a group of like-minded officers over encrypted channels. The council is weak, he told his co-conspirators. They will negotiate with these savages, compromise our security for temporary peace. We must act decisively. What are you proposing? One of his supporters asked. A surgical strike, Kelthar replied. We eliminate the human flagship and decapitate their command structure. The council will have no choice but to support us once the shooting starts. It was, he believed, the only logical solution. What Kelthar didn't understand was that by targeting the sleeper fleet, he was about to prove every fear the council had about human ruthlessness absolutely correct. The standoff was about to turn hot, and the galaxy was about to witness what happened when you cornered humanity and gave them no choice but to fight back. Commander Kelthar's strike group consisted of 7 destroyers, all crewed by officers who shared his hardline views about humanity. They broke formation under the guise of repositioning and moved to flank the human fleet where their weapons would have the best angle on the Defiance. It was a careful maneuver designed to look routine until the moment they opened fire. Aboard the ESS Valiant, Patricia Cole was the first to notice the anomaly. Captain, we have council ships breaking formation, 7 destroyers moving to grid 7 Alpha. Jake studied the tactical display, and his combat instincts immediately sensed danger. That position gives them a clear shot at the Admiral's flagship. Red alert all stations. Charge weapons. Nathan warned that powering up weapons could trigger a full engagement. They're already triggering it, Commander Jake said. Greg, get me Admiral Chen. Patricia, target those destroyers but hold fire. Across the sleeper fleet, similar warnings were spreading. Admiral Chen saw the threat developing and made a split-second decision that would change everything. All ships, defensive formation Delta. Prepare point defense systems, but do not fire unless fired upon. But Kelthar had already made his choice. On the Righteous Fury, he gave the order that would ignite the powder keg. Fire, he said. 7 destroyer-class plasma lances stabbed through space toward the Defiance. The human flagship's shields flared, absorbing most of the impact with bursts of blue energy. But one lance penetrated, tearing through the aft section and killing 37 crew members instantly. Alarm screamed across the Defiance's bridge. For a moment, everything froze as both sides processed what had just happened. Then Admiral Chen's voice cut through the fleet channel, cold as the vacuum of space itself. All ships' weapons free. Defend yourselves. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations to come. The sleeper fleet moved with a precision that shocked the Council forces. These were not the clumsy, hesitant humans of the modern era. These were warriors from humanity's darkest period, when survival meant overwhelming response to any threat. When hesitation meant death and mercy was a luxury no one could afford. Jake's orders were crisp and clear. Patricia, target the destroyer that fired first. Full-spread kinetic and energy weapons, erase it. The Valiant's weapon systems built in an era when overkill was the only reliable doctrine unleashed hell. Railgun rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed tore through Righteous Fury's shields like tissue paper. Missile pods dumped their entire payload in a single coordinated salvo, and when the ship's reactors breached, the explosion was visible from Earth's surface as a brief new star. 6 other Sleeper Fleet ships focused fire on the remaining attacking destroyers. The Council ships tried to retreat, but they had triggered a response they weren't prepared for. Within 90 seconds, all 7 destroyers were destroyed or disabled, and drifting in space as burning hulks. The Council fleet reacted, launching their own attack in response. But they quickly realized they were fighting an opponent that operated under completely different rules. Human ships didn't try to disable enemies or target specific systems for elegant victories. They simply concentrated fire until nothing remained. The Valiant took hits from 2 Council cruisers and her shields strained under the assault. Jake felt the ship shudder around him as energy blasts walked across the hull. Return fire, same targets. Nathan, get damage control teams to decks 9 through 12. Patricia's fingers danced across her console with practiced efficiency. Targeting solutions locked, firing. The cruisers never had a chance. The Valiant's ancient but brutally effective weapons carved them apart in seconds. On the Defiance, Admiral Chen made a decision that would define the entire engagement. All ships cease fire. Hold position. The command rippled through the fleet. Human ships stopped firing even as Council vessels continued to launch sporadic attacks. Those attacks quickly ceased as Council commanders realized the humans had pulled their punches. They could have kept firing, could have pressed their advantage, but they stopped. Open a channel to the High Arbiter, Chen ordered. Cephalon's holographic form appeared, and his crystalline structure flickered with agitated colors that betrayed his emotional state. Admiral Chen, you have committed an act of war against the Council. No, High Arbiter. One of your commanders committed an act of war against us. We defended ourselves, and now we've stopped firing even though we could continue. Chen's expression was hard. We've destroyed or disabled 23 Council ships. How many of ours have you destroyed? The answer was obvious from the tactical display. Despite the Council's numerical superiority, their losses were severe while the Sleeper Fleet had suffered only moderate damage. No human ships had been destroyed. This is the difference between us, Chen continued. We remember how to fight wars without restraint or without mercy. You've forgotten. Your ships are designed for peacekeeping and police actions. Ours were designed for annihilation. He paused. But we don't want annihilation. We want recognition. We want respect. And we want an end to this quarantine. In the Council chamber, the mood had shifted dramatically. What had seemed like humanity's desperate bluff had revealed itself as genuine military capability. The casualty reports were still coming in, but thousands of Council personnel were dead or wounded. Ambassador Threx for once was silent. It was Scales who spoke, and his voice carried the weight of what had occurred. High Arbiter, perhaps it is time to reconsider our position. The humans have demonstrated they can defend themselves. But more importantly, they've demonstrated restraint by ceasing fire when they could have continued. Restraint. Threx finally found his voice. They massacred our ships after we fired first. Scale shot back. And they stopped when ordered even in the heat of battle. That shows discipline. Cephalon studied the tactical displays and his crystalline mind processed probabilities. Continuing the battle would result in massive casualties on both sides. Even if the Council eventually prevailed through sheer numbers, the cost would be catastrophic. And for what? To maintain a quarantine against a species that had just proven it could not be contained. Admiral Chen, Cephalon said slowly. You say you want recognition and respect. What specifically are you proposing? Chen straightened. Immediate lifting of the quarantine. Restoration of Earth's Council membership with full voting rights. A mutual defense treaty that acknowledges humanity's right to maintain military forces comparable to other Council species. And a formal investigation into the commander who initiated this attack. In return, we will submit to reasonable arms inspections. We will integrate the Sleeper Fleet into Earth's official defense forces, making everything transparent. And we will contribute to Council security operations, proving that our military capability can be an asset rather than a threat. The debate that followed lasted 3 hours. On Earth, billions watched as their fate was decided. On the valiant, Jake kept his ship at full alert, ready to respond if negotiations failed. Finally, Zephalon announced the Council's decision. The quarantine on Earth is hereby suspended pending a full review of your proposal. Diplomatic teams will be dispatched to negotiate the terms you've outlined. But understand this, Admiral Chen. The galaxy will be watching humanity very closely. Today you demonstrated your military prowess. Now you must demonstrate your wisdom. Understood, High Arbiter Chen replied. We'll prove we can do both. As the crisis de-escalated and both fleets began standing down, Jake felt the tension drain from his shoulders. They had gambled everything and won, but the cost had been significant. Casualty reports coming in from the fleet, Greg announced quietly. 412 dead, 823 wounded. Jake closed his eyes briefly. 400 people who had gone to sleep 4 centuries ago dreaming of protecting humanity's future, and who would never wake up again. Make sure every name gets recorded, Jake ordered. They died defending Earth's right to exist. That means something. Weeks later, the negotiations were complete. Earth's quarantine was officially lifted. The Sleeper Fleet, now redesignated as humanity's first colonial defense force, began integrating with modern Earth forces. And humanity took its place at the council table no longer as supplicants hoping for acceptance, but as equals demanding respect. Admiral Chen, now officially recognized as humanity's chief military commander, addressed the council during Earth's readmission ceremony. We understand why you feared us, he said. We remember what we were and what we're capable of becoming. But we also remember why we chose to reach for the stars instead of destroying ourselves. We wanted to be better. Sometimes being better means being strong enough that others can't hurt you. But it also means being wise enough not to use that strength unless absolutely necessary. He gestured to where Captain Jake Morris and other Sleeper Fleet commanders sat in the gallery. These men and women are from humanity's past, a harder and more violent past, but they're also part of our future. They remind us of what we've overcome and what we must never become again. The galaxy judged us and found us wanting. We've proven that judgment was premature. Now we'll prove it was wrong. On the Valiant, Jake watched the ceremony from his quarters. His ship was scheduled for a refit integrating modern technology with her old systems. The Sleeper Fleet would remain as a distinct force within Earth's military, both a reminder and a warning. Natty,